Educators Lead, Episode 9.
The most important thing has nothing to do with my desk. It's these kids out here, and I can get a lot done, and even though it might not be on my to-do list.
Welcome to Educators Lead, where we interview leaders in education to offer inspiration and practical advice to help launch educators into the next level of leadership. I'm your host, Jay Willis, and I want to thank you for subscribing to our show.
This is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Educators Lead. Let's join my friend Jay Willis and get ready to take your leadership to the next level.
Hello, Edu Leaders. Jay Willis here, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Dr. Brad Gustafson. Brad, are you ready to launch?
Jay, we have already launched. We have liftoff. I am in orbit. Where are you? Get up here.
That's awesome. So Dr. Brad Gustafson is an elementary principal in Minnesota, and he's pioneered efforts to transform pedagogy to reflect best practices in a digital age. He's committed to leveraging technology as a transformative tool that inspires creativity, connectivity, and innovation. Brad is a TEDx and keynote speaker and exudes a passion for leadership that's palpable. That's just a brief introduction, Brad, but tell us a little bit more about yourself.
All right. Well, that sounded actually pretty good. The real Brad loves his wife. He loves his 3 kids, and he adores his job serving as a K-5 principal in the Wayzata Public School District. We have 860 students here and just a really inspiring staff. So
that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your career path.
Yeah. So in college, I always kind of pondered, what would it be like to be a student all the time? Because it's not that I was the best student, but I did like taking classes, whether it was sociology or psychology or you name it, philosophy, education, it didn't matter. I did enjoy that. And I kind of inadvertently followed that path. So I became a second grade teacher and just continue to be in love with, I guess, all elementary kids, but I loved my 6 years as a second grade teacher. Got my master's degree. That was great. I went on and got an ed specialist degree so I could be an administrator, and then now I have my doctorate. So that kind of played out.
Yeah. So tell us, at what point did you make the decision that you wanted to move into school leadership?
Jay, I think I was probably laying in my bed wondering what just happened, because here's the story behind the story. My principal had come in and just said, Brad, I think you'd be a good principal, or something like that. And it kind of floored me, like, what? I love teaching. I had never honestly considered it. And she gave me the pamphlet to, I forget what college course, or, and I just thought, is it, honestly, I was thinking, am I a bad teacher? What's the deal? Why is she doing this? But now looking back, actually, maybe I won't skip any steps. So then I went home and I was talking to my wife a little bit about it, and whether it was a day or a week later, just kind of laying in bed talking a little bit. And she just said, Brad, don't limit God. You love learning. So just, the classes, that would be something you would want to do anyways. And then at that point I thought, yeah, I do. I love taking classes, as I indicated earlier. So I did sign up, honestly, with no intention to become an administrator. I just took the classes because it was interesting to me. And then things started to shift a little bit from there.
Huh. Wow. So tell us about the journey along the way to becoming a school administrator.
Yeah, the journey has been rich, and I think the mindset and the lens that I just bring to every situation is I love learning, I love talking, I love connecting to people, so that whether something is hard or easy or makes me think, or if it's a little more in my comfort zone, I just kind of thrive and derive energy from it regardless. So the process was great. There were a couple challenging moments. I remember taking one class, and I forget the class, but I remember there was a Friday night class to get my admin licensure, and I'd get home around 9:30 or 10 at night. And we had homework from that class, and then we had the same class Saturday morning. And I still can't believe that happened and I made it through, but that was probably one of the more tricky parts, although of course, those things actually kind of make us stronger, and it was fine, but it is kind of a funny story. Can you picture that, Jay?
Yeah.
Friday night class, homework, and then you get up Saturday morning. You better have your homework done because class is right away.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be intense. So at the time, did you have children? Like as you were taking the classes, what was going on with the rest of your life? So you were still working full time. How did you juggle all that? Like keeping on top of your schoolwork and then working and everything else?
One thing that had to give, I was a varsity soccer coach, and that I eventually stepped back from. And that was a position I loved, coaching, mentoring, learning from the high school guys, but that couldn't happen. It just didn't work. There were days where I wouldn't see my kids, and partly because of classes, coaching. So that was one thing. You have to make your choices and priorities. The other thing is just a supportive relationship with my wife and figuring things out together and just doing everything as a team. So there might be days where, on a weekend where she might take the kids for 3 hours and go to a park or do something, and that would help me get done what I need to get done. And that's just selfless on her part, and it was just really wonderful. I remember driving to, whether it was church or family vacations, I always had research and textbooks with me.
Yeah.
And my wife was gracious enough to drive. And that's one way where I felt like I didn't miss out, other than on the car conversation. I was able to be with them and partake and still get my homework done. So just little subtle shifts that made it work well.
Yeah. So what was it like in those more difficult times? And maybe, it wasn't an intense struggle all the time, but in those times where it was a struggle, what kept you going? What kept you motivated to push through that?
If I'm being honest, Jay, it was a great ride. It's been a great ride, and it just works. You just chip away, you keep going. I think if there were really hard times, it was when I had to step back for a couple weeks to take care of other things. It was honestly harder to get back on the bike, so to speak.
Yeah.
Research and master's classes and doctoral classes are not like riding a bike, at least for me, because if you get a little rusty or if you forget what you read 2 weeks later, it's a little extra effort to relearn. So for me, what always worked, and maybe it's just kind of how I'm wired, is you just keep going and you chip away and you make a difference, and sooner or later, your goals are met.
That's good. So you kind of alluded to it earlier, just when you were talking about some of the more difficult times. But you talked about, you grow stronger and you learn great lessons from those challenges. What are some of those lessons that you feel like you've learned through the journey?
One of the lessons I've learned, here's one. I've probably learned more about being a principal by being a principal than by taking classes and preparing for it. Although I think some of those trials help prepare your mindset, and they kind of condition you for being able to do whatever, multitask. And, teaching is an incredibly challenging job. So if you're a great teacher, like I work in a school that is packed with amazing teachers, the skills that you need to be a good teacher really translate nicely. So that's a tough question, Jay. What do your other guests say that's brilliant? Let me learn from them.
Yeah. Well, it kind of is across the board, but a lot of times, there's lessons about relationships or about just, persevering, about goal setting. There's just different things like that maybe come through the journey, because obviously it does take a lot to be a teacher. And it seems like it takes a whole lot more to be a teacher and also be pursuing school administration simultaneously. So for you to take those classes and for you to be effective as, if you are married and have kids, to be effective as a husband and a father and as a teacher and still pursuing this goal that you have.
Sure.
I don't know if you feel like there's any significant lessons that you feel like it came through that process.
Yep. I suppose it's all personalized, or, it depends on the individual and their circumstances. But for me, what I learned was what I prioritized is actually what got done. So the way it worked for me was family was a priority, partnering with my wife and keeping that relationship awesome. and then school and education. And we were both on board. And I have to say, in that order, if there ever would have been a point where she needed a break or she needed me to step back, I would have done that because she would do it for me. It just so happened that we pushed through together, and the way that we prioritize things, it meant that there were certain things that maybe our friends were doing or things that we maybe would have wanted to do. We just didn't do that because that wasn't the priority. And I'll give you one small example. It's going to sound weird, and for some it may sound like torture, but football. I love watching football, and in the last several years, I have not watched that many football games, and same with when I was going through the program, and it's because I didn't have time to do that. I prioritized other things. And when I was going through my dissertation, I remember when I was finally done and earned the degree, watching that first Minnesota Vikings game, as painful as it was, it was pure joy. I'm like, I cannot believe I get to watch this. But that's just because the lesson that I learned in my prepping to become an administrator was I just have to prioritize other things, and that's how I get things done. And one other example of that, Jay, is I remember spring break. A lot of my people in my cohort had plans or travel plans and important things that they were prioritizing, but I literally said, I'm going to take a week off work, and I am going to write this thing. I'm going to do the research and get it done. And I'm not talking about my dissertation. Those can't be done in a week. But in the specialist and master's area, that's what I did. And I think the first day I probably worked 12 hours. Wow. And the second day my stamina wasn't quite the same. I maybe worked 10. And the third day I worked 8. And, I knew each day when my breaks became longer than the work time that, okay, it's done. I'm done for today. And tomorrow's another day. But I walked out of spring break having what I needed to have done, and it felt really good. And a lot of my classmates made other decisions that really worked for them and their family. I'm not judging them, but just how I prioritized it helped me persevere, like you said.
Yeah. Well, one thing you've spoken to here that I don't think has been brought up so far, so very valuable just advice, I think, or insight, is just the team that when you made the decision to become a school leader, it was more like a team decision. Like it was something that you and your wife had kind of discussed and made the decision together that, hey, this means we're going to make some sacrifices. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it just, from what you're saying, it seems as though it was not something where you just kind of pioneered and said, I'm going to go off and do this on my own, but you really needed her buy-in and commitment to that as well. Is that right? Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, without a doubt. And she's an encourager, and she has great discernment in life and in everything. So yes, and even in the process of earning my first administrative job, we would talk about where I was interviewing. We would just do some preliminary research so we weren't wasting the other people's time too.
Right.
Just looking at the community and things that were important to us, and could we pay the bills with this? How does family fit in? What's the cost of living and the housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I remember going down to my first principal job, I interviewed, and I called her on the way home, and she said, how'd it go? And I said, it went a little too well, because I could just sense there was a great connection and fit, but yet it was scary. So from then on, I think there was a second interview, or maybe they offered the position, and I said, well, I'd like to have my wife and I would like to come and tour the community in town and check things out. So we did that, and the rest is history.
So I actually had a chance to watch your TEDx talk, which I thought was awesome. And that's like a whole other episode, I'm sure, as far as how all that came about and all that. I really enjoyed watching it. But one of the things that came out through that was just your heart for the students. And I know that that's kind of what it was about, the arms wide open.
Yep.
So just kind of knowing that you're wired that way, I'm sure you have to have lots of just wonderful stories, meaningful moments that came about since you become a school administrator. But if you could just take us, if you could think of maybe one of the most significant stories of impact that you've had, and take us to that point in time and just share that story with us. I know our listeners would appreciate that.
Yeah, it's such a humbling, inspiring position to be in, and to be able to connect to so many different hearts and minds during the day. It's amazing. I can't really explain it. There's one story that sticks out of many, but sometimes the pile on the desk is significant. There's just a lot you have to get done, whether it's from the state or for the district or just connecting with parents and stuff, but I had felt like I wasn't getting anything done, and it was tough, because the evenings can be somewhat long sometimes too, not all the time, but I was cruising down the hallway, and I just kind of detached from my desk to build some relationships, help out. And a little kiddo needed something, and I was able to help them. And I forgot what they needed, but I was there, and maybe it was tying a shoe or something. But it was what they said afterwards that was just a revelation for me. They said, "Thank goodness you were here, Mr. Gustafson," or sometimes they can't say my name right. That's a lot of kids call me Mr. G or Dr. G. But I just thought, you know what? Kind of how dare I say I haven't gotten anything done today? The most important thing has nothing to do with my desk. It's these kids out here, and I can get a lot done. And even though it might not be on my to-do list, it's probably a lot more important. So that's been great perspective for me. And I'm guessing that you've heard this from other people, but it is a joy. And anytime you're feeling like you need a pick-me-up, be in a classroom, talk to a teacher, watch the work they're doing, support them, have a conversation with students, go out to recess. There's really nothing like having that flexibility to go out and support and encourage and be encouraged just by seeing the work that's being done.
Yeah, that's great. I think I've said it in previous episodes, but just one of the biggest things that stood out to me from other senior leaders who are further along in their journey than I am is the thing that stands out that they've said is spend your time with people, not paper, as a leader. Mm-hmm. And that's hard. I mean, when you have so much stuff to do and you just look at your desk and there is just this big pile that seems to be taking over, it's difficult. Yep. But I mean, just what you talked about, I mean, the biggest impact you have is in the lives of those students. And you're really not going to have that by dealing with that stack of paper.
Yep. And there are strategies and there are ways to be with people more, even if you have to do paper at school, which is a reality sometimes. I have a mobile office, or it's a desk on wheels, whatever you want to call it. It's a nice looking cart. It's not a junky cart, and it can hold an iPad, a laptop, lots of stuff. If I am called out for an emergency or to help somebody, I can quick lock my stuff underneath if I need to do that. And that's been really neat, whether it's observations or just connecting with people to cruise around. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll plant myself in the media center and get some stuff done, but just experience a culture and be able to greet people and they can see me and I'm not behind my desk. So obviously I'd like to do that more, but it is one tool that I try to use.
That's great. Yeah. So obviously you've been a teacher and now you're a school administrator. What's the biggest difference in impact that you notice between when you were a teacher and then now the impact that you have as a school administrator?
Yep. The biggest shock to my system was the depth of relationships I had with my students. And then getting to a level where you're with hundreds of kids, it's different, and it's more difficult to go as deep with all of them. But that doesn't negate the influence and what you can do. And I've found a way to feel like I have that. I still get fulfillment from the connections I have, and I still have the chance to visit kids' hockey games, football games, after school evening events like I did as a teacher. You can still do that with families, just more. The other thing that surprised me was, as a teacher, you maybe work with one or two kids or families that are in crisis. Well, I guess it depends on where you're working and your kiddos that you have. But for me, as a second grade teacher, I never had that many kids that had issues that might even require county involvement, things like that. As a principal, you're with, maybe 30, maybe 35 classes. So you do have to multiply that out, and you are aware of most of the need. So that was kind of a shock. And sometimes that can be sad, due to empathy and just wanting to help all kids and protect them from certain things. But
how do you overcome that?
I think you be present and you love them as best you can. So when they're here, you just show them love and grace and understanding. And just by knowing some of their stories, that helps me. It feels better because I just try to pour on the love so that if they're experiencing a difficulty when they're not here at school, I know that they have us. I guess that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah. So regardless of what else is going on in their life, at least you're creating a safe zone for them at school.
Yeah, not only a safe zone, but I guess I go out of my way to make a difference for kids. It's almost like personalized principling, where you try to make a difference for everyone. You try to have that connection. You try to challenge them and help, even increase their capacity or their potential. But there are some kids where you will go the extra mile at school because they need you to go the extra mile. Mm. So in unexpected ways, making that connection. So That's one way.
That's great. So, okay, I'm about to roll through some rapid fire questions real quick if you're ready.
Woo!
So, first of all, what's the best leadership advice you've ever received?
Get connected in a digital sense. Period. Get connected. And so what does that mean if you're not connected yet? Mm-hmm. It means signing up for Twitter and attending conferences and beginning to talk about and share and receive information from people on Twitter, Voxer, reading blogs, starting a blog. That has been life-changing for me as a learner, I would say, because with what I'm learning in that connected sense, I'm better able to support our team and then bring in some opportunities for kiddos that I might not otherwise be aware of.
Yeah. So just kind of to expound on that, I know I said rapid fire, but I want to expound on this a little bit. So how would you suggest, if it's a teacher who has aspirations of becoming a school leader one day and they are just brand new to Twitter, how would they get started having conversations in that space? Great.
I would say pick a Twitter chat or two. And if you're not sure what a Twitter chat is, anyone listening, it's they're everywhere. And there is a master list out there if you just Google it. But there's a hashtag, and I'll just use Iowa EdChat as an example. So maybe once a week on Sunday mornings or Sunday nights, you want to participate and connect. And you don't have to be from Iowa to participate in the Iowa EdChat, but they will have pre-framed conversations and questions that are available. They'll tweet them out in every 5 minutes for an hour. And you'll actually have a chance to learn from people, but also make connections during that chat because you'll see the same people tweeting and visiting that chat over and over. I would say Twitter did not make sense to me for the first 6 months until I started doing educational chats, and then it really ignited my learning and helped cultivate deeper relationships from people who just seemed like faraway avatars and numbers to me. But now it's very real, and some of my best friends are people who I met on Twitter.
It's great. Are there any other conversations? Like you mentioned the Iowa, the hashtag. What was that again? The hashtag?
Yeah, I think it's IA for Iowa EdChat.
Okay.
Or EDCHAT. There's MN Lead. That's Minnesota. Actually, that'd be a really good one for your audience, Jay.
Okay.
I think that's on Sunday nights too. There are so many. There's a Stu Connect chat that we started where kids in classrooms can connect, and we have 4 planned throughout the year. Our next one's coming up in January. That's hashtag STUCONNECT.
Okay.
So that'd be a way to learn with student. Yeah.
Very good. What would you say is your biggest strength as a school administrator?
My biggest strength. I have, and I'm going to share this with you, Jay, but I just need to kind of pre-pack this and say that sometimes a person's strength can also be a limitation or weakness, so we have to be mindful of that. So I'm going to share this, but I want you to recognize that I also know I have blind spots, but I'm very committed to giving kids a relevant and connected and world-class educational experience, and I'm not talking in the jargony way. I'm talking in a very real way that pushes the envelope and requires a paradigm shift in how we think. So it's using technology not just as a checklist item, like, okay, there's an iPad in that lesson, well done. I mean, it couldn't be further from that, but it's in giving kids experiences in school that sometimes we'll use technology to connect them to kids halfway around the world, but yet are grounded in learning targets and standards, and kids are so on fire for their learning that they don't want to leave or they don't want to be done with that lesson. So thinking outside the box, if there is such a thing as a box, is probably under that umbrella. I'll just give you a quick example. We have some educational drones where kids can do lots of crazy programming and design mathematical challenge courses. We have robotic droids here where kids are coding their way, and I've done health lessons, language arts, math. They've even done morning meeting. I want kids to experience innovation and these technologies, because the reality is, when is the right time? It is right now. It's in elementary school, because these kids are going to be, they need to be able to change the world and have great discernment and digital leadership by the time they get to middle school and high school. And if we don't start scaffolding that in elementary school, we've done a disservice to them. So my passion for giving kids that relevant and connected experience, so they have skills above and beyond being able to do really well on a test, is probably what I would consider a strength.
That's great. That's great. So is there a book or two that you'd recommend for other school leaders that made an impact on you?
I love The Noticer by Andy Andrews, and that's not necessarily a school leadership book, but it's one we buy for all our kids' teachers. So I'm just going to throw that out there because it's one of those life-changing, inspiring books.
Mm-hmm. And what's that about?
That's about somebody who notices things, as the name somewhat implies. And I think as school leaders and effective teachers, we have to be noticers. So it is very germane, but it's not going to be about pedagogy or instructional leadership. But it's I would consider it a must read if you're a human being.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems like in my own life anyway, especially when it comes to relationships, my relationship with my wife, it's really a lot of the little things added up that make the big difference, And I guess it's probably kind of along those lines. It's just paying really close attention to the details. So yeah, that's a good book, a good recommendation. I'm going to have to check that one out.
Yep.
Is there a technology tool aside from Twitter or Voxer or an app or software or something like that you would recommend to other school leaders?
Yeah, I will. The first thing I want to say, and I'm sorry for derailing your rapid fire thing here because I know I'm talking. Okay, but I want to say the most important thing, the most important tool with any technology is the pedagogy it's used in. So I am going to give you a tool, but I think we have to have a better understanding as emerging educational leaders and school leaders and even accomplished school leaders who are still learners of what we want technology to do for us and our kids.
Right.
And I don't think that's out there. So for me, I have 4 things I look for when I'm talking about technology, and then I will give you the app. So consider this the longest teaser ever, Jay.
I'm eager to hear.
Okay. So does it help me collaborate? Does it increase learner ownership or student agency? Is there a level of digital connectivity? And then does it create a learning experience as opposed to just kind of a lesson being taught or something that kids are ambivalent about? Is it something that they're screaming for more and talking about at the supper table? So those are the 4 elements that I apply to lots of different things, whether it's a communication I'm sending out, an experience I'm facilitating, a student assembly, a staff meeting. So with that said, my tool is TouchCast. Has anyone said that before?
I don't believe so. Not now, or not up till now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's almost like an app smash in and of itself, a combination of the web and video.
Okay.
So it's interactive video, and it's very versatile, and even novice, beginner, first-time users can create pretty polished video communications. But the reason that is so important is for the 4 kind of components or tenets that I outlined, that it can ignite new levels of collaboration between kids, between teacher and kids. It can increase their ownership because instead of passively receiving information from a textbook, they can be creators or apply what they're reading or learning or researching along with other friends, and they can embed some really interactive tools and connect with others and share out their videos, creating an experience. I'll give you a quick kind of 30-second example because I think stories are a little more powerful than just a principal saying a tool that he thinks is good.
Right.
But so I remember walking down our hallway one day, and we had a couple of boys create a genius project they're working on with their teacher. And I stopped and talked to them because it looked interesting, and I thought it was cool they were podcasting, but they had researched how to solve a Rubik's Cube in less than a minute. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And they were talking about there's some algorithms involved. And I thought, okay, cool. We went on our way. Later that day, the teacher had tweeted out a picture of them presenting their project, and it just said, whatever, way to go, kids, presenting on your Genius Hour project. And then So they had shown their class the podcast that they created, but then that digital connectivity, and this is where the pedagogy comes in, it wasn't just about the podcast they created. Because they connected in a digital sense, a school on the East Coast saw what they did, and they invited and said, hey, can you teach us how to do that? So then, I forget if it was a week or two later, our kids did a GHO or a Skype with the school on the East Coast and taught their students how to solve the Rubik's Cube in less than a minute. That was an experience, and I was actually in the classroom for that part. But it took a lot of different pieces. It took student ownership because the kids were given the autonomy to pick an area of passion, research it, and then create the digital product. Teacher blasted it out on Twitter using social media as learning media. Somebody else saw it and just created this thing where our kids became the teachers. That's a tool, but the tool facilitated something greater than an app really could. It took an amazing teacher to facilitate the next steps, and our kids were the benefactors.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What were the kids' response to that? Who were responsible?
It was really cool. It was really, really cool. Obviously, the two kids who were facilitating and teaching were totally into it and did an amazing job. But the thing that I was most struck by was the rest of the class as they were watching this video conference happen. It was palpable, and you could just see that they were feeling like our work matters. What we're doing here matters above and beyond these walls. It's not just going to go home and be hung up on the refrigerator. Other people care, and we have value that we can add to this world. It was you really had to be there to experience it, but it was amazing. It was amazing.
And what was that tool called again?
TouchCast is the video app.
Okay.
Yeah, and we use lots of different video apps. TouchCast is the one that I definitely prefer.
That's neat. What's your favorite educational quote?
So I wouldn't call it a quote because it's something I said, but it's more of just something I firmly believe. And I consider it educational malpractice to limit student opportunity based on what we refuse to learn. So any aspiring administrator, current administrator, if we are setting up artificial barriers, whether it's our mindset thinking, I'm not techie, or I'm too busy, or whatever the excuse is, that doesn't seem relevant. We don't need to do that. Our kids, we can keep doing the literacy thing. Well, what if kids need more? And what if it's just a different lens and you can still do the literacy thing really well and have kids learn at a high level, but yet it's very relevant to them because you're learning. I believe that to my core. I think we owe our kids more than what we're giving them as a system. Mm-hmm. So I just think we have to set the bar higher from a pedagogy standpoint. And I'm not faulting anyone. I think teachers have incredible barriers that they're up against and haven't even been given the personalized professional development and support in many cases to be able to think like this. So in many cases, administrators have to model this learning mindset. Instead of being knowers and experts, we have to be in the mix. And I could tell you right now some things that I'm learning, because how am I going to expect my teachers and our teachers and our kids to learn these things if I don't have the skin in the game and if I can't be a support? So.
That's great. I love that. Don't let your unwillingness to learn and grow keep your kids from learning and growing. It's kind of the takeaway I got. That's great. I really like that. So what advice would you have for a school leader for working with the students? Like one piece of advice that you'd have for them working with the students that they serve?
Seek ways to do it in all you do. Putting kids first is critical, but find ways, identify ways, talk to other people, get connected, because there are strategies and practices out there where people are doing this, but you could kind of do it two ways. You could do it the traditional way, how you think it's always been done, and try to get out and about and do the cafeteria supervision and connect with kids from time to time. Or you could totally knock it out of the park and form deeper relationships with kids by, for example, I used to do a weekly email newsletter that I don't know how many parents read it, but it took me several hours to write the thing. Now, in a third of the time, I work with kids. We do a working lunch almost once a week. They come into my office. We have a blast. I get to know them very, very well. And we create and edit this podcast that features kids. And then we pump that out as a learning update for families. And then weeks later, there's a special connection that I have. That's just one little kind of a microcosm of what I'm talking about, how you can change what you're doing, be in the mix, learning with kids if you just reinvent the position a little bit to be more child-centric and leverage some of the tools, digital and otherwise, that we have. Another quick example, we have a couple flat screen TVs in our school that stream tweets. We have a school hashtag. It's hashtag GW Greats. And there's this community, and we've always had it before the TVs were up. It's not about the TVs, but the TVs enhance our connectedness, because now I can't be in 35 classrooms all the time, obviously, but I can follow the Twitter feed and see what kids and teachers are sharing, what's important to them. There have been times where I'll see them tweet something, I'll run down and participate or ask questions or high five or whatever the case may be. So that's another way to stay connected and stay in the mix, and it's just leveraging a digital tool to actually enhance relationships instead of supplant.
That's great. What one piece of advice would you give to a school administrator for working with the educators that they lead? So in other words, the other teachers that are in the building.
Listen to them. Listen more than talk. And I try to be really collaborative and collect feedback. And for example, our professional development, our team has created a model that I consider just to be an exemplar in the country, and it has little to nothing to do with me. But what it is, I guess the only thing I have done is listen to them, because they will tell me what they need, and we will build it. So we have professional development breakout sessions and a cohort model to help people go deep, and there are even sessions that are optional to them, but this is what people are asking for. We've given it to them, so we're meeting their need. And if you apply that strategy, if you will, or that common sense to lots of different areas, people will feel heard and they'll be empowered to speak, and their ideas are 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, better than mine, Jay. So thank goodness I do listen.
Yeah, that's great. What's the best way to connect with you?
I think Twitter is probably the easiest. I'm at Gustafson Brad. So at Gustafson Brad, Gustafson Brad, B-R-A-D. And if they can send me a direct message. If I'm not following them, hit me up and I'll follow them and we can talk offline.
Okay. I think one of the biggest things that I've gained from this conversation, I know a lot of times probably if you're a teacher who's considering moving into school administration, you can probably think, well, I'm going to miss that connectivity that I have with the students. And I feel like the message that you're conveying here is that if you're just creative and you're committed to continuing to have that connectivity, and I think an important component of that, correct me if I'm wrong, but is being willing to listen to those educators, to the other teachers who are in there with the students all day, that you can still have a high level of that connectivity even when you move into an administration position.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the schooling thing. If you prioritize that, and if you want it, you can make it happen. If you don't want it, you can make excuses. I was in an observation, I think it was 2 days ago, and in the back of my mind, I knew I wanted to learn about these Edison Robotics. They're Lego compatible, codable little vehicles that kids can engineer with.
Yeah.
I noticed we have this fleet of mobile maker spaces in our school with lots of high-tech, low-tech things kids can create with. That was a cart that hadn't been checked out often, if at all. And I thought, I need to learn this so that I can see if it makes sense for people to use and recommend it. So I'm kind of thinking, when am I going to have time to figure out how to use an Edison robot and create? There's some really cool stuff. Well, I went down and started putzing around myself. And then when I was in the observation, I was talking to a kindergarten teacher, and somehow it just came up where I was telling her about it because she does some really cool stuff in her room. I said, hey, it'd be really cool if your kids maybe could try this Edison robot. I go, I don't know how to use it, but we could learn together. And she was very excited, and she invites me in a lot. And when teachers invite me in, I always try to go in, and it's like the highlight of my day. But she invited me in for this. We co-planned a lesson, and we're going to go in, and we are going to knock it out of the park first week back in January. Now, the neat thing is I connected with another teacher ahead of time because these Edisons and the model is it's complicated. It's higher level stuff. Mm-hmm. So we have some fifth graders that are going to pre-create not a 3D printer, but they're building using these Edisons. If you put multiple Edison robots together, you can create drawing machines, if you picture that, where they draw stuff for you and feed the paper in using pulleys and stuff, but the
Wow.
kids are making that, and they were doing that today for us. So then I'll go into a kindergarten class, I'll show them what the fifth graders engineered, and it's very cool stuff. But then the kindergartners will make a more age-appropriate model based on that. So they'll just try to find, using Legos and these robot little droid vehicles, find a way to affix a marker on their robot, and then do some programming where just the marker that's very basically attached can do some drawing on the paper. So they're seeing what in a couple of years they'll be able to do, but they're empowered to invent, and we won't have the answer right away, but I guarantee we're going to see some really cool stuff. But the reason I bring that up, Jay, is that was me, my lens that I bring to these observations even is being really open and interested in being a learner, collaborating with staff, and then, I'm lucky enough where they'll invite me in from time to time and we can do some really cool stuff together.
Yeah. That's great. Kindergarten. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. So, last question. If you could go back to when you were a teacher and you had just made the decision to move into school leadership, what advice, if you could go back and speak to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah. I would say you probably don't want the first administrative job that you apply to. I know you'll be super excited for it. You'll think it's perfect. It's your dream job. And then you may be disappointed when you don't even get a callback, or you don't even get an interview, or you do get an interview, but it doesn't pan out. You might be devastated, and that's okay. And it's just part of the process, and you keep sticking at it. I think if I would have gotten my first job that I applied for, I would be a high school dean. And that's not me, Jay. I'm in my area of passion right now. So that would be it. And I've talked to other aspiring administrators on Voxer, and they get very excited about interviews, and even if they're in their district and they kind of feel like this is meant to be, or it's close to my house, but it doesn't always work out, and that's okay. People will still support you. You'll get through it, and that perfect job will come along.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brad, for sharing all of this with us today. EduLeaders, this has been a great interview today. For the show notes of today's show and other resources, visit educatorslead.com and type the word Brad into the search tool to find his show notes. And Brad, thanks again for sharing your journey with us today. And that wraps up another episode of Educators Lead.
Great to connect. Thanks, Jay.
This podcast is brought to you by Mometrics, the #1 test preparation company. Mometrics offers study materials for over 1,800 different exams, including the SAT, ACT, GED, end-of-course exams, state standard exams like the STAR, teacher certification exams, advanced placement, CLEP, ASVAB, GRE, and so many more. Mometrics takes the mountains of information students could be tested over for any given exam and boils it all down to just the fluff-free golden nuggets of information that are most likely to be on the exam. They couple that with some great study tips and test-taking strategies to help students maximize their test scores. With their interactive tutorial videos and a layout that makes lesson planning easy, Mometrics study guides, flashcards, and practice questions are a great fit for individual or classroom use. To learn more about our products and our vault of hundreds of free tutorial videos, please visit educatorslead.com/test prep. That's educatorslead.com/test prep. EduLeaders, thank you for joining us on Educators Lead. Visit us at educatorslead.com for everything we talked about today, free resources, and much, much more.